Hi, Mario. Shavua Tov.
Johnny, how are you?
Good. How's Anna?
Good, good.
Okay. Send her my regards.
I will. What's going on here? All right. Oh, Walter.
Hi, Peggy.
Hi, good to be.
Hi, Gitzler.
Shavua Tov.
Good to be.
Hi, Fanny. Gitzler.
Hello.
Looks like the gang's all here.
Yeah. Where's Susie? Harold, you got an honorable mention in show today. Why? Talking about Kashus, your daughter-in-law is the granddaughter.
Oh, right. Shandalov. Yeah.
Yeah. The rabbi was talking very nicely about that. So.
Oh, yeah. He was a very nice person. Yeah, Benny Shandalov.
Mm-hmm.
It comes from nice yichus.
Yeah, that's the other side. No, very nice people.
Ellen, how are you feeling?
Thank God today was the first day that I feel like I'm on the right path.
Well, what happened?
You had COVID?
COVID is
Again.
Again?
Yes.
Again?
How are you feeling, Ellen?
She says
I
she's
had
doing
rebound
better.
COVID.
What were your symptoms?
Mostly cold symptoms. A runny nose, sore throat. But I couldn't get rid of it. And it made me so tired.
When did you get it?
I'm sorry?
When did you get COVID again?
I got like a rebound COVID.
What do you mean by a rebound COVID?
I took Paxlovid, and I don't think it's strong enough to do the whole job. So a week later, I started with the same symptoms again, and I've had it almost a week.
Oh my!
Yeah. So today was the first day that I felt like a half of
Feel
human.
better.
Yeah. So, but Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem.
Okay, we learned Perek Yud Aleph last week, sort of globally. Now we're going to go through pasuk by pasuk.
Ernie, could I just say that in Tehillim, Perek Nun Aleph, it says, Lamnatzech mizmor David bevo elav natan Navi kasher ba'er bat sheva. The Art Scroll commentary says that the incident of David, Uriah, and Bathsheba is found in, it says Shmuel, Yud Beis. As pointed out by the sages, David sinned only ethically, not technically, since Bathsheba was legally divorced and Uriah had forfeited his life by defying the king. So that's just what Barbara was saying about it being an ethical problem.
Correct. We touched upon that last week. That you're referring to Perek Yud Beis, which is going to be the Perek after Yud Aleph, where Natan Navi comes to David to chastise him about what he did wrong. He needs to do tshuva. So yes, this is a 2-3 perek episode. This perek, the one we actually learned it last week, just through the psukim, it describes the event, and we're going to have to go through and understand the various shitot, as we mentioned it last week. So perek beis, pasuk beis, vahi leita erev, hayakam David me'al mishkavo. This is like in the evening. David wakes up. Vayitalech al gag beit hamelech. He goes to the roof. Vayari isha rochetzet me'al hagag. He sees Bathsheba washing, bathing. Va'isha tovat mareh me'od. So, what's going on here? So, in Brachos, it describes David HaMelech's daily schedule. Brachos Gimel Amud Beis. Rav Zera Omer at chatzos halayla haya misnamein kesus. Up until midnight, he would take little naps every 20 minutes, like a horse. Mikan ve'elech haya mitgaber ka'ari. From chatzos on, he was osik b'Torah, v'shirot, v'tishbachot kol halayla. In fact, Rav Ashi Omar at chatzos layla haya osik b'divrei Torah. Up until chatzos midnight, he would study Torah. Mikan ve'elech b'shiros v'tishbachos. And he would occupy himself in writing Tehillim at night. So therefore, he was sleeping until until late in the afternoon because of his schedule. Some say, why did he go to the roof? It was a very tall building. As king, he would check out Yerushalayim, what's going on. Make sure that everything is good in the city. Or some say it was for relaxation, says the Das Sofer. The Malbim says, number one, the fact that David didn't go to the war was a problem. And then Asara Od, this was also going him to sin, because he wasn't occupied in Tzorchei Ha'am because of his schedule. So it's considered, says the Malbim, the fact that Lo Asak B'Tzorchei Tzibur, Rak Halach L'Tayel Al Gag Beit HaMelech, Uvazeh Ba L'Idei Avera Shera'a Isha Rochatza. And that led to the sin of him seeing a woman bathing. Then it says in the Gemara Sanhedrin Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph, Amar Rav Amarav, a person shouldn't think that, I'm going to put myself in a matzav of nisayon and I can overcome. Shari David Melech Yisrael Levi atzmo lidei nisayon v'nichshal. Amar lefanav. David said, Ribono shel olam, mibnei ma omrim Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, ve'Elokei Yaakov, ve'ein omrim Elokei David. When we say Shmona Esrei, we say Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, but David said, well, I wanted to say Elokei David as well. Omar inu minsuli. The three of us were tested. V'at lo minsisli. You were not tested. Omar lefanav Ribono shel olam b'chaneni v'neseni. David HaMelech asked Hashem, test me. Like it says in Tehillim, Chav Vav, Pasuk Beis, V'chaneni Hashem v'niseni. Omar min tzlocha, v'avin milsa badech, dilididu lo datinu v'yuana komadanela. In fact, I'm going to test you, and in fact, I'm informing you that you're being tested, and to the Avos, I didn't inform them. And the masnin l'cha b'dvara erva. Your test is going to be sexual immorality. Immediately, miyad vayhilei ta'er vayakam David me'al mishkavo. And immediately David comes up and goes to the roof. Rashi says there, Amar Rav Yehuda shafach mishkavo shel laila lemishkavo shel yom, shahaya mishamesh mitato bayom. David used to have relations with his wives in the daytime, כדי שיהיה שבע מתשמיש, so that he would be satisfied. ולא יהרהר אחר אישה כל היום. Therefore, he wasn't involved in thinking about women the rest of the day. However, nit'alma mimenu halacha, a famous halacha he forgot. Shamazbia evor b'tashmish ra'ev umarbeh taveh. Someone who has a lot of relations, he's hungry for more. Ever cotton yesh ba'adam, a man has a small organ. Mazbio, if he makes a lot of use of it, ra'ev, he becomes hungry for more. But umarivo, if he starves it, savea. So he didn't understand that the thing that he was doing to try to prevent him from thinking about women all the time was making it worse. And then the Maisa happened that he went to the roof, he saw the woman, Batsheva, washing her hair. The Gemara brings a story that the Satan appeared like a bird, and it was like he shot an arrow at the bird and it broke whatever was protecting the modesty of, was hiding. Some say it was like a beehive, and then she was revealed. Now, I just want to bring what the Musar Nevi'im says about this episode where David challenged Hashem to test him. Says the Musar Nevi'im, Masha Omrim, Elokei Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov, Ze mipnei, Shehema hayu ha'avot shel hadat ha'Yisraeli. They are the fathers of Judaism. V'kol echad mehem ba, v'hosif nofech mishalo b'dat hazot. Each Av added a new wrinkle in Judaism. Avram Chesed, Yitzchak Gvura or Avoda, Yaakov Torah, because Tiferes is Torah. Lachein ba David, va'amar ki tzrichim liyached gam alav shmo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we say Elokei Avraham Elokei Yitzchak, we're being miyached the name of Hashem with their names. Mipnei sha'ad shelo niskaim el malchus beis David, hayu omrim abriot, ki dat Yisrael I efshar la lidkayem rak etzel kibbutz katan shehu muvdal min ha'olam. Up until the time of David HaMelech, who established Malchus Beis David, the rest of the world said, yeah, Judaism is a nice thing, but it's going to be for small entities, families, a tribe. It's impossible. They're going to have to be separated from the rest of humanity. It's not going to be able to function. Eino malchut umemshala. Aval, im yeh lahem keter shel malchut, az yitbatel mehem haketer shel Torah. You won't be able to wear a crown of kingship and a crown of Torah at the same time. V'zeh haya chidush shel David, shehu ba v'iiched et hadat im malchut. David is the first person, he creates a theocracy. He unifies government and Torah. That we can have a government that's run by Torah. B'yachad. V'asa otan l'chativa achad. He made him one unit. V'her'a l'chol ba'ei holam. Just like Avram showed the world the concept of chesed, just like Yitzchak Gvura. David wanted to say, or David's contribution to be able to say Elokei David on the same plane as Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak Yaakov, because he established this chidush in the world of unifying Malchut and Dat. She'efshar l'shtehem litkayem b'yachad. Lachein hu ra'ui sheyeh gam hu nechshav lechad me'avot shel Dat Yisrael. So David, in his mind, thought that he's also ra'ui, fit into Shmona Esrei and to say Elokei David. V'lachein hevi oto HaKadosh Baruch Hu lidei nisayon. HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought him this test. V'her'a lo shehamalchut shelo hayta b'ochrav lavo lidei chet. You know, kingship can also lead to sin. Ki lo im lo haya lo koach hamemshala lo yabed kofet bat sheva shetiyeh muelet bebayla. It was the power of the king that he could send Uriah away. V'rak mipnei pachad hamelech ba gam hi lidei chet. V'od shim lo haya melech az haya chet shelo nigmar im ha'maseh razeh v'lo haya mosif chet al pesha. That means if it wasn't for the fact that he was a king, remember David is going to try to hide this. Send Uriah to his house. So he adds sin upon sin. If he wasn't a king, fine, there was a sin. But it would have been sin on top of sin. Kivan shaya melech. Since he was the king, he wanted to hide his sin. He used the power of the king. Umasar et Uriah sheyeh nerag al yedei cherev ne'amon. He sent Uriah to the front lines to be killed. Uvazen natan makom lomar ki mutav yel Yisrael im lo yeh koach hamalchut biyadam. Based on this, it would have been better that maybe the Jewish people should not have a malchus. Ki keter tor v'keter malchus hema shnei dvarim hatzorim ze lazeh. Wearing the crown of Torah and the crown of malchus maybe are opposed to each other. Therefore, we don't have Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, Elokei David. Because perhaps this lesson really, he failed regarding this lesson. Yes, Bernie, you want to say something?
Yeah, you'll remember that we dealt with this a number of prakim ago, where David also asked, he wanted to, why isn't there Elokei David? And we said that he didn't achieve that level. However, in the Haftarah, we make the bracha Magen David to acknowledge that the Malchus would come from him. I want to just add, the Me'am Loez talks about it from Batsheva's point of view instead of this incident on the roof, from a different point of view, looking at it. I'll read to you what the Me'am Loez says. The Medrash relates Batsheva, who had received a get from her husband, knew through Ruach HaKodesh that she was destined to bear the next king. 3 times each day, she would dress up and stand at the window, hoping that David would notice her. When she realized that she had not succeeded in gaining the king's attention, she uncovered herself, and David was instantly attracted. It was because of this incident that our sages Chazal would say, do not go walking about on the roof.
But that's not there's a machlokas though, whether or not she enticed him. Not everybody thinks that David, that Bathsheba tried to entice him.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily saying it as enticement, but since she knew Baruch HaKodesh, she was trying to get his attention without with the last statement that you made. That's all. I guess that's what this medrash is trying to point out. That's all.
What I read before the Musar Nevi'im, what they're fighting against is absolute power and abuse of power. I mean, we'll see that there is concept of malchus in Israel, but it's pointing out the danger of absolute power and the abuse of power. Now, the Gemara Sanhedrin, Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph, Doresh Rava, Mai Dichsiv Ki Ani Litzela Nachon. Rashi says, Oset Selai Anachon Li, Umachovin Agdi Tamid, Ru'uya Isa Basheva Bas Eliam LeDavid Misheshis Yimei Breishis. Chazal understand that the shidduch between Bathsheba and David was already created at the time of creation. Now, I pointed out to this last time, even though it says in Sota Beis, normally for most people, Arboim Yom Kodim Yetziras Avlad, Bas Kol Yotzes Vo Omeres Bas Ploni LePloni. Before everyone's born, 40 days before that, a heavenly voice comes out and says, the shidduch of this person is going to be with this person. So what do you mean, Misheshis Yimei Breishis? So shidduch zeh haya nogeh lechol ha'olam mishum deshlomo hamelech yatsa mimenu v'hu yivneh beit hamikdash. So this shidduch of David and Bathsheba that eventually they're going to have to get married that already had to be from Misheshis and Me'amaisa, Misheshis Me'breshis, because it affects the whole world. And yes, what David, the Me'am Loaz brings this medrash that Barshava also saw Baruch HaKodesh that Shlomo Melech was going to come from him. So she would get dressed up and by the chalon, like Bernie said. Now, Shlomo Melech was that at this time 55 years old, because it's going to be the child that they have now is not going to be Shlomo Melech. It's going to be another child who dies. And then Shlomo Melech is going to be born 2 years later. And Shlomo was 12 years old when David HaMelech was 70. That's how we know this. So Shlomo HaMelech began ruling when he was 12 years old. And even at this point, he didn't have a king that he was clearly going to designate as his successor.
Is there a direct source that David asked to be tested? Or is that something that
So that's a medrash.
that's
Yeah, it's a medrash. Now,
although David was
so even though
hard to say that David wasn't tested, he was shunted by his family.
he wasn't tested in an akuda that would rise to the level of Lokei Avraham, Lokei Yitzchak, Lokei Yaakov, which is something unique that those avos added to the religion of Judaism. And David thought that the part that he's adding is this combination of Malchus with Judaism. And apparently he didn't do it properly, so therefore he wasn't granted. He didn't fulfill the Nisayon.
Is that why we say in our davening in the morning Shalom Day that we should not be brought to a Nisayon?
Yes, but that's the Gemara started off saying a person shouldn't ask for a Nisayon because you don't know that you can withstand a Nisayon. Now, Chazal say that yes, he was destined to marry Bathsheba, but now is not the time. We've seen multiple times with Shaul and Shmuel. A lot of the problems that occur, it's because they don't wait. They're not patient. They try to push history, and it wasn't the right time for it. Now, Rav Schwab discusses this issue that David wanted this Nisayon. I'm going to read what Rav Schwab says. Nisayon zu yeh kanisayon shel avos shegavar l'nisayon b'li siyata d'shmaya. V'al zeh zachu likros avos. The avos overcame their Nisayon without Hashem's help. V'nosan Hashem shmo aleihem v'yikra Lokei Avraham Lokei Yitzchak v'zeh Hashem iskim l'dvarav. So Hashem was going to give David a chance, but he's going to do it b'inyan arayos. And he removed the siyata d'shmaya. And now he'd have to do it, he'd have to fight the Yetzer by himself without help. Umishum zeh lo yatsa le'milchemas Amon, ki chashav shesham ulai fagesh b'isha yifas toar. In the time of David's battles, if you found a beautiful woman in battle, you could take her as a wife. Eventually that happened. His marriage to the Yifas Toar that he captured ended up giving birth to Avshalom. So, and that's why it mentions here, let's say, Samlachim. There, Rav Schwab says the Malachim there refers to actual angels who protect us. And David did not have that protection, and that's why he failed. Pasuk Gimel. Vayishlach David vayidrosh laisha. David sent messengers to say, bring the woman to me, or to find out about her. Vayomer halo zot bat Sheva bat Eliam eshet Uriah Chiti. He was told, he wanted to know, is she single? Is she neshes ish? It's a little problematic, say the Meforshim, because David HaMelech himself, it says, the Medrash says that Uriah Hitti helped David HaMelech in his battle against Goliath when he cut off Goliath's head. And he gave Bathsheba to Uriah as a gift. So he knew that she was an Eshes Ish. However, we know, we talked about this last week, Hu Nasala get Krisus Kodem Shiatz Melchama. Uriah gave her a get, like all the soldiers in Beis David gave a get. Like it says in Ksubis. Daf Tesom and Beis, that those of us in the Daf Yomi learned it. Kol hayoytzel lemechamas Beis David get Krisus Koisev liishto. At that time, anyone who went into battle would give a get to his wife. It's a pasuk there, V'sachicha tifkod l'shalom v'aruvasam tikach. This happened when Yishai had sent his sons to help Shaul HaMelech. Then he sent David after them. And he said, make sure you bring the get, the gets that your brothers gave for their wives. And this was, I explained last week that there's Machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi says the get was a T'nai get. It means if I don't come back within 12 months, it'll be a get from today. So January 1, he gives the get. He goes off to war. And if he's killed sometime in that year, the get is chal retroactively to January 1. So if he gave her a get January 1, and David HaMelech had relations with Bathsheba in March, and Uriah gets killed in June, so retroactively the get is chal from January 1, and she's not an Eshes Ish. That's how Rashi learns. Tosfos learns, no, they got a regular get. January 1, she's a divorced woman. There's no t'nai, he has to die, none like that. Which makes it easier for David in that, according to the way Tosfos learns. And again, this is the most important chazal we're probably going to learn. It says Shabbos Nun Vav Amud Beis. Shabbos Nun Vav Amud Beis. On Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, on Rav Yonason. Kol ha'omer David chata b'Vasheva kodim shekibla get eina ela toeh. Whoever says David sinned with Bathsheba is mistaken. Shene'amar. It says in Shmuel Aleph. Vahi David l'chol drachav maskil v'Hashem imo. Efshar chata bol yodo v'shchina imo. Could he have a sin, committing adultery with an Eshes Ish, and would the Torah describe it? What Tanakh says v'Hashem imo cannot be. Say Chazal. So he did not sin. We've discussed. We're going to discuss what the sin was. It's not a sin of Eshes Ish. So Elamani Mekayim. Now, like Fegi said in Pasuk in Perek Yud Beis, Nason HaNavi is going to ask him, Madua bazisas dvar Hashem lasos hara be'ini. Why did you do bad in God's eyes? Well, so he did something wrong. So Rashi says, Shebikesh lishkavi makodim shekibla get. He wanted to sleep with her before she got the get. The purpose of giving a get was that they wouldn't fall a yibum to their brother. Or maybe they would die and nobody could give testimony that he died. They couldn't recognize him and the wife would be in aguna or taken prisoner. So bikesh lasos velo asa. So the Gemara says David wanted to, but he didn't do it. So, but on someone's level of David HaMelech, it's already considered Rabbein Hashem. Shebikesh lasos velo asa. Now, then it says, not one of the chastisements of Nason HaNavi in next perek, he says, "As Uriah Hitti hikisa b'cheref." So doesn't that sound like David HaMelech caused the death of Uriah? So shaya lecha laduno. You shouldn't have sent him out the way you did. You should have brought him to court in a normal way. Says Rashi there, al shemarad b'malchus. He was someone who was rebelling against the king. How are we going to see that? We're going to see in the psukim. but he should have been taken to Sanhedrin and let Sanhedrin deal with him as a Morid B'Malchus, v'lo danto. Ves ishto lakachta l'cha isha. You took his wife as his wife. Says Rashi, that shows that she was not an Eshes Ish. Likuchen yesh lecha ba. You were married to her. Kiddushin tofsin ba she'ena Eshes Ish. If someone is a married woman, another man comes to that married woman and says, Hareat Mukudeshas li. That kiddushin is not chal. There's no halachic validity to that kiddushin because you can't be makadesh an Eshes Ish. So the fact that the pasuk says, "As isha lakachtel chal isha lekuchin yesh lecha ba," you could have had kiddushin with her because she's not an Eshes Ish. Because kol hayotzel mechav David kosev get krisus. Anyone who went out in David's battles were given a divorce. Then the Nosson Navi says to him in Perek Yud Beis, "Va'oso harakta b'cherev b'nei Amon." Rashi comments, "Ka'osan shahargi b'nei Amon shalom idaitcha. Ma cherev b'nei Amon yatanena shalav af ur yachit yatanena." You're not responsible for if b'nei Amon kill people. You are also not responsible for ur yachit. You're not punished for that. My taima morid b'malchus hava. The Omer lay in front of David HaMelech. Uriah used the words Va'adoni Yoav. He said, "My master Yoav." Well, you should have said Va'adoni David. That in front of a king is considered Morid B'Malchus. Lav Orech Aris, says Rashi, Lekabel Alav Moros Acher B'fnei HaMelech. You cannot accept the mastery of somebody else in front of a king.
Does this seem to come? It almost seems like it comes from anger. He's angry at David HaMelech, first of all, for David HaMelech telling him to go back to his wife when he felt that his place was at war. I don't know, it stems from...
You mean Nosson Hanavi is angry at him?
No, I'm talking about with Uriah HaChiti. Uriah HaChiti is the one who said Adoni Yoav.
Yes.
Rather than, it's very disrespectful. Like, he just seems very, very angry, very upset with David HaMelech. Is it possible he may have even suspected something? A king badgering him to keep going back repeatedly for him to go back to his wife.
Oh, so maybe he was suspicious.
Maybe he was
already
suspicious.
about David.
Could that be?
And that's why he insulted him.
Yes.
Could be. However, the pasuk in Malachim says the only place where David sinned is Bidvar Uriah Chiti. So Rashi there says, "Shegaram lo sheyahareg aval b'vasheva lo chata." So there is a tzad that he was sort of responsible for Uriah's death. And then remember we learned a few weeks ago that Kibel David Lashon Hara. Remember he accepted Lashon Hara, and he might have been over in Lashon Hara, but Al Isra Eshes Ish he was not over. And that's by the Nosson Navi discussion with them. We're going to go over this as well. Now,
Didn't he endanger other people because he tried to put Uriah in a precarious position during the war, but then he endangered the other people fighting with him.
No, he instructed those fighting with him to back away from the front line and leave Uriah by himself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, everything I just learned, it's all Drashas Chazal. It's not seen from the Psukim. The Malbim brings proof from Pshat. The Afal Pi Pshat Tzarech Lefarsh Al Pi Ma'alach Zeh Shedavid Lo Chata Be'eshes Ish. Mishum Sha'isa Az Bas Shava Grusha. The Malbim is now not like the Abarbanel. Like we said last week, the Abarbanel himself says that from the Parshat Pshat we see that David sinned Be'eshes Ish, and therefore the whole story is told to show the power of tshuva. and that David HaMelech is the paragon of tshuva, that he committed an aver ve'eshes ish, because basically the Barbanel is learning Pashut Pshat the Psukim, but the Malbim argues very strongly. He says like this, few proofs. Shem Haisa Basheva Eshes Ish, Eith Lacha Achar Kach Isha. We're going to see later on, David marries Bathsheba. Now, the Shulchan Aruch and the Gemara Paskins, we know, if a woman commits adultery willingly as a married woman, she may not go back to her husband. It's Asr Labal, Asr Laboya, and she cannot get married to the man who she committed adultery with. So if she was an Eshes Ish, says the Malbim, how could David eventually marry her? That's going against halacha. Halo isha shezansa baratzon tachos baila asur labal l'boil. The i'ave bo'oinus adayin asur l'boil. Now, chas v'sholem, a woman is an Eshes Ish is raped. She can go back to live with her husband, but she can't live with the person who raped her. Now, of course, a kohen, the wife, it's a problem, Eshes kohen, because then you can't even ba'oinus. She's considered halachic zon and she can't go back to live with the kohen. But if he's considered, if it was done even against Bathsheba's will, David would never be allowed to marry her. Now, we're going to see in a few psukim, in a few prakim, that David HaMelech davened and fasted that the son that he and Bathsheba had from that liaison should live. But if she was an Eshes Ish, it would be a mamzer. So why would he daven so hard and Psalm? That's what the Malbim says. Number two, and number three, Eichnis kablo tshuvaso. Va'isha asur lo midivrei Torah meres bevesav reizah kemutel v'sheretz biyado. What do you mean? How would his tshuva be forgiven? If you're about tshuva, so we know somebody walking by a McDonald's and he's tempted and wants to eat a hamburger at McDonald's. He eats the hamburger. When does the person become a Baal Tshuva? He has to walk by the McDonald's when he's hungry, and he has to be in the same matzav and overcome his yetzer and not eat it. So how, if he was declared as a Baal Tshuva, how could he have Bathsheba, the person he did the sin with, in his house while he's being a Baal Tshuva? It's like somebody who has a sheretz, which makes you tameh, and you go in the mikvah with the sheretz. Well, how can you become a tar holding on to the sheretz? That's how the Malbim says. Now, Eich bachar Hashem mizera nolad me'aisha zot, shevet moshlim vayikra shmo Yedidya, b'shem avo, yihaita asrullo. Eventually, David and Bathsheba give birth to Shlomo HaMelech, who is called Yedid Hashem. Is someone like that going to be born from someone who's usher to David HaMelech? So the Malbim says, according to Pshat, not according to Drosh's Chazal, Mavur Shabbat Sheva lo nesra al David. Ki hayotzel mechomayte yayakotev get krisus liishto. He says this is proof that she was a divorced woman and she was not an Eshes Ish. Now, who's this Uriah Chiti? Radak says that he was a ger from Bnei Chet, or he was a Jew who lived with the Bnei Chet. Rav Avram, the son of the Rambam, says Uriah was a ger toshav. So he was a ben Noach who accepted the Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach. It's considered ger toshav. Therefore, according to Avram ben Avrami, she was not an Eshes Ish. She was married to a goy, but that's not the mashmos of the pasuk. But that's the sheet of Rav Avram. It's as if she was never married. So 3 shitot. He was a ger, came from Chet, or he was a Jew who lived in the area of Chet, or he was a ger toshav. So the Pnei Yoshua asks, how could he be a ger came from Chet? The Chiti were one of the Sheva Amim, and they're not allowed, you can't marry into them. We're going like the Rambam says, the Pnei Yoshua, that if the Sheva Amim convert, then you can marry them, even after they become Jewish. Okay, there's different shatim here, but we see various opinions regarding, like we brought last week. Dalit. Vaishlach David Malachim vayikacha. David sent messengers to take Bathsheba, but Tavoy Lav, Vaishkaviman. She came, which l'chora sounds like she was willing. They had relations. V'hi mitkadeshet mitumata. She was not tamei. When it says that she was washing, bathing, means she went to the mikveh. But the Toshav el Beisa, at this time she goes back to her house. So the Meforshim look from here that when it says Vatavoy Lav, that she was not raped. She was willing as well.
Why would she go to the mikveh if her husband wasn't around?
So maybe the husbands popped in without them knowing. Oh no.
No, I think that women went to the mikveh, even though their husband wasn't around, but to maintain that continuity of, when when it's time for you to go to the mikveh, you proceed to do that.
Yes, and you have to go. That's the mitzvah
And
to
you have-
go in
and
the
you
right
have
time.
to- Mhm.
So some say that she was willing to go because, as we said, she saw Baruch HaKodesh that she's really this bashered for David, and that Shlomo Melech is going to come out of him, and therefore she went because she wanted to be Makayim, the Nevuah, or whatever the Bas Kol had said. So there is an opinion. The Kli Yakar says that Bathsheba Nusa Haisa, she was considered like raped because she came for fear of the king. So it was really against her will. And that way, she could have returned to live with Uriah when he came back. Because like we said before, a woman who's raped can live with as long as he's not a Kohen, can live with his wife.
Ernie, excuse me, who actually gave Bathsheba to Uriah? Who made that shidduch?
Well, the Medrash says David HaMelech did.
Was it David HaMelech?
Yes, because
Why would
Uriah
would he
helped
be in a
David HaMelech
position?
cut Goliath's head
Because
off.
I know he helped him. And he wanted to marry somebody from Bnei Israel. So David was the one? It wasn't Shaul? It wasn't Shaul?
No, it says David. No, because
Is it David was actually,
David
because
is the
it's
one who
some,
needed to cut his head off.
because they were, no, I think he helped him. I don't know. David was surprised when he found, so it doesn't make sense. David was surprised when he found out that she was married. He was surprised about that. So it just doesn't make
Remember, I
sense.
asked the question.
You asked her. Right.
We asked the question before. How can we say he didn't know her? He's one who
Right.
gave her the shidduch.
So it doesn't make sense.
No, so we answered it.
Oh,
that
what was the answer? I'm sorry.
This Uriah got to get. So he knew at that time that she was not Neshes Ish. That's how we answered when we asked that question over there.
So,
David did recognize her because
I see. Okay.
But it's not a problem. Remember, because it says he was doiresh after her. He wanted to find out facts. Is she a married woman?
Right. Exactly. Right.
So he found out that she was not an Neshes Ish.
So she wasn't. Okay. Okay. So thank you. Okay.
Another interesting thing that the Hayam brings, the reason we were told that she went to the mikveh to show clearly that she's not pregnant. Because a pregnant woman's not going to have simone, they're not going to become nida and then stop bleeding. We're going to see there's a din. You have to have a havchana of 3 months before you get married. If someone loses their husband or gets divorced, you cannot marry a new husband until 3 months go by, because we got to know for sure whether the woman is pregnant or not, to know whether or not a child that's born is the father, the husband that just divorced her or died, or is it the new husband? We're going to see in a few psukim, David marries her right away. There's no period of havchana. Well, we know for sure that she wasn't pregnant. So because she's having nida sites, therefore there was no purpose of having havchana shlosha chadoshim. That's how some of the Farshim say why we were told this. The Malbim says that Uriah gave her a get on Zion Sivan, and this Ma'aser of Batsheva was Chav Daled Elul. So it was more than 3 months. So there was no problem with Havchana there as well. Okay. I'm going to stop now. We'll probably have maybe one more week on this parak and then move up to Yud Beis. Next week we have a break. Some of us on this call are going to be on a trip to Portugal.
Enjoy.
Yeah, and we'll be back, God willing, the following week. And then Mirz Hashem will send a notice that we'll do Saturday night the Navi Shir again, but we'll have a break for 1 week.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, safe travels.
Shavua tov, all the best.
Shavua tov.